I guess that might be the good segue into talking about corruption, collusion, big tech, working with government. Do we talk about the Biden social media discussion as to the suppression of not suppression, fortification, as I'm jokingly calling it now, of information in terms of government actually now asking for assistance from big tech to suppress misinformation online? Are we now, we've seen the progression of lawsuits against YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, going after, the First Amendment arguments, the municipal city type arguments. Are we now not getting a little bit closer if we see overt collaboration between government and big tech?
Well, it was fascinating timing because we had 3 articles come out this week about this, and it's while a suit is currently pending by Robert Kennedy Jr.'s Children Health Defense against Facebook that was alleging this had already been taking place, that the CDC and other government agencies were conspiring with Facebook to censor and suppress independent information that raised questions about the CDC's interpretation of its own data concerning the safety and efficacy of various vaccines and other medications and therapeutics and other forms of treatment. And they basically removed some of their ads, did some other discriminatory actions, and they have a motion to dismiss pending against them. They fought back. Their allegation is that the First Amendment applies because Facebook was acting as an agent of the government in doing what they were doing, and they already had reason to believe that was occurring. Well, while that motion is pending, 3 stories come out, one from the New York Post, one from The Hill, one from Glenn Greenwald, confirming that, in fact, since Biden has been in, they've intensified that. The Biden administration is colluding with big tech to suppress and censor any information that raises any doubts about the COVID vaccine in particular, but also other governmental actions in the public health space. And they're demanding that Facebook censor, suppress, manipulate information and data to prevent that information from being received and heard and distributed to the public. And one of the guy that's on the front of this to many degrees is Robert Kennedy, who's, contrary to what people said, he's not an anti-vax or anything about it. He just believes you need to always have a public debate about public health issues that impact people's privacy and have informed consent consistent to the Nuremberg Agreement, Nuremberg Code after the Nuremberg trial, which said we were never going to do that Nazi experimentation again or allow any form of civilization or society to do so, despite our own horrendous Buck decision by the Supreme Court decades before that the Nazis actually relied upon and utilized for their own authority. And as Dershowitz noted, it was one of the most horrendous decisions ever issued in the history of the Supreme Court. Might have helped persuade him on some of the aspects of the logic as well. There's some emotional strings you can play there, but it's a horrendous case for good reason, good cause. Because of it, I think it does. I think for people who don't know, if a private actor is actually acting in collusion, in conspiracy, in cohorts, in coordination with the government to do something, then there is evidence that they can now be held liable under First Amendment standards because they're acting as an agent of the government. And this goes all the way back to the old civil rights laws, part of the Ku Klux Klan Act and the like, passed in the same time frame. The concern was what happened when you have someone like the Klan, private organization, acting at the behest and behalf of government authorities to suppress civil rights and civil liberties. They created laws that said no, private actors can also be responsible when they're in collusion with government authorities. And now we see 3 stories: the New York Post, The Hill, including left-wing Professor Cherminsky from USC, saying this is a problem, and also the article by Glenn Greenwald. So you have Dershowitz come out against this, Turley come out against this, Cherminsky come out against this. Now Glenn Greenwald come out against this. Now other people coming out, and he's also a lawyer. So you're seeing a lot of lawyers on the left condemn what's taking place because they recognize the value of a robust debate. And the main plaintiff in all of these is a famous left member himself, Bobby Kennedy Jr.
And it's an amazing thing. First of all, I know it's only a matter of time before I get accused of being an anti-vaxxer because, the idea that you should support freedom of speech is somehow makes you guilty through demonization and guilty by association. I didn't even realize how heated the debate was when I made a video a while back about having cut my finger metal detecting, and I went and got a tetanus shot. And then everyone's like, oh, you got a vaccine. And like people, I didn't even think of it at the time. So I am by no means an anti-vaxxer. And with that said, I don't think you convert people from being anti-vaxxers by suppressing their ability to have discussions and shutting down YouTube pages. And it's gotten so bad. My wife, everyone knows, she's a neuroscientist. She is in a neuroscientist community. They're now being censored from putting posts on Instagram, and I think Facebook as well, that reference vitamin D, taking vitamin D because it's related to the Rona.
It's proven to be very good. People that have high vitamin D levels in populations in countries that have high vitamin D levels are seeing far less negative adverse impact from COVID. So it's like, why are we discouraging people? You can take vitamin D and get the vaccine. My view of the vaccine is let's have a public health. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Bobby Kennedy's not an anti-vaxxer. His kids have got almost all the vaccines. He himself has got almost all the vaccines. It's simply making sure there's public choice and informed consent. And we can't have informed consent if we removed informed from the process. And that's the problem. And we can't allow the buck line of logic to ever become public health policy anywhere in the world, or we will get Nazi experimentation again. So that's why I find it morally horrendous. All the white lab coat crowd said eugenics and sterilization was a great idea in the 1920s. And you combine that with the power of the folks in the black robes, and we got one of the most morally horrendous decisions in the history of American jurisprudence. And it was the main citation used for the Korematsu case. The second worst decision ever issued by the United States Supreme Court. Third would be Dred Scott. Fourth would be Jacobson. But we cannot go back down that path. And Bobby Kennedy Jr., he's like his father. Yeah, he's someone with a deep conscience who just asks questions. And I think, and that's it. And the attacks on him are insane. But I think people who are conscientious on the left, our lawyers, are starting to wake up. I mean, Dershowitz disagrees about some aspects of what's required for the vaccine, but he agrees that Bobby Kennedy should absolutely have free speech to raise questions and about its efficacy and safeness so that we have the informed word in informed consent.
And for anybody who wants to have their minds absolutely blown, just Google RFK Jr. and just read the articles that come up. If they refer, you'll be flabbergasted. It's like the media is working in cahoots with big tech, who's working at the behest of the big government now. You will see it's crafted. They kick him off social media platforms so they can besmirch his name in article after article that, by all accounts, somewhat misrepresents his position.
Oh, completely. I mean, frequently they said he lied when he didn't lie. He shared information. And to go back to a commenter from last week, no doubt CDC does not agree with Bobby Kennedy's questions, or mostly he asks questions rather than makes statements. But to the degree they don't agree that their own data means what he claims it could mean. No doubt about that.
Now I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you there, Robert, and we're going to address a comment that someone emailed me from last week, that the CDC, and you posted a response to the question. I posted an update in one of my videos, but we'll do it now as well. The CDC stats on their webpage confirm, they call them vaccine adverse effect report something. So VA.
I think it's VAERS or VAERS. Yeah, and this is where the data comes from, where there's a dispute is about the interpretation of that data.
Right. So the data says there have been 1,170 at the time deaths reported through VAERS, which is the Vaccination Adverse Effect Reporting System. That's what it was. Now, so the argument is that anybody can file a report through VAERS, and there's no, there's no immediate causation correlation. Anybody can file a report. Then the CDC apparently is supposed to go investigate. Their conclusion is, yes, we've received various reports to the effect that 1,170 people have died in proximity with the vaccine, but their investigation reveals no causal effect between any of them. So that is to correct the number that, what you said last week was that the CDC confirmed that there have been X amount of deaths resulting from. That is the disputed element. There's numbers through the VAERS system. CDC says no correlation, and Robert F. Kennedy apparently was asking too many questions, and they booted him from social media. And that's what needs.
And that's where there was no misinformation. He was citing their data, and it says, the question is what the impact is. CDC has its interpretation. He has questions about the accuracy of their interpretation. And as I pointed out to that commenter, I was like, the CDC right now has contradictory standards. They're saying if you have the vaccine in you and you die even in quick proximity to it, there's no causative relationship. You have to go further to prove that. But if you have COVID in you, maybe months before and you die, we're going to call that a COVID death, even if there's proof there's no causation. So which is it? The COVID vaccine has one medical standard and COVID has a completely different medical standard. It suggests political manipulation of the data.
Politics ruins everything, especially science. And, my wife has a colleague who was talking to her and saying, yeah, I can't post articles about vitamin D on Instagram and Facebook. And then apparently went on YouTube to Google censorship and came across the Dave Rubin episode with Dr. Pinsky, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and Dr. Z-Dog MD, Zubin Damanian. And some lawyer was talking with them, and she didn't know that.
Yeah, some Canadian lawyer, some controversial Canadian lawyer.
No idea that lawyer was her colleague's husband. But it's like, the scientific community now is starting to feel the effects of this, where big tech is playing overlord in a world in which they have no expertise. And so it's a crazy thing. What's more dangerous? Free speech, where people might adhere or be subscribed to the wrong ideas because they don't have enough information, or shutting it down, thus, in fact, confirming to far more people that there must have been some truth to it, lest you don't, when you cut out a person's tongue, it's out of fear of what they're going to say. You don't win the debate. I've mangled that expression. But it's like you have big tech now playing the role of MD. You have big tech now playing the role of expert, as opposed to having an open debate about it. And, if some people get misinformed, some people get misinformed.
My view is if they're right, they shouldn't be scared of debate. Number one, I have that principle in general. Number two, I don't trust any system that says we can't allow juries to determine this. We can't allow the public to know the facts. That if there's any dispute about a vaccine, everybody's immune from liability. And if there's any degree of responsibility, it's going to be in a secret court in DC by some bureaucrat that's not public and without a jury. My view is and for folks that don't know, the reason why they created that whole system was because they got caught screwing up during the swine flu vaccine that was issued in 1976 that led to disastrous public health consequences that the media has tried to memory hole, because if people recognize that context, they might be like, hold on a second, let's make sure we have a full debate so that we can have informed consent. And if you want the vaccine, God bless, get it, get it. If you have problems, if you want more information, you're entitled to that under the informed consent principle, and they're trying to preclude that. And Bobby Kennedy may be the one to hold them responsible if his suit is able to go forward in federal court, helped by this critical information that this is a coordinated campaign by the government ordering big tech to take these steps.
Now, does it become a Marsh v. Alabama type argument, or does it just become another principle of law? And for those of you who don't know, we discussed it last week and many times. Marsh v. Alabama is the corporate city, which is technically not a government entity, an incorporated city. Sorry, it's an incorporated city, but basically acts as the government, therefore should respect the Constitution. Does the argument now become a Marsh v. Alabama, or is it another extension of another principle? That
it goes further, because whereas Marsh v. Alabama said that once you become a monopoly of the public square, you have First Amendment obligations, then the Supreme Court pulled back on its meaning on that, though the Supreme Court in California continued it in the Pruneyard Doctrine, applied it to a private mall. The U.S. Supreme Court did not. In this particular context, they get to go beyond that, because it's always been recognized that if a private actor is acting at the behest or in collusion or with conspiratorially with the state, so that they're effectively the state's agent, then the principle is this: the state can't get around the First Amendment by having a private actor enforce their will. So the only question then becomes, are they a state actor? And these stories sure show that they sure seems to be strong evidence enough to get to the discovery stage. And Bobby Kennedy's suit for the Children's Defense Fund is the named party, or Children's Health Defense, is the named party, could get into some very interesting discovery. And maybe Instagram and the rest will regret taking on Bobby Kennedy Jr. They may have they may have crossed the Rubicon when they did that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's to some extent confirms what we know. I'm surprised that the Biden administration would be so overt about it. Like, typically you'd keep it on the hush hush, in the worst sense of hush hush. It would be the wink of the eye. Big tech would do the bidding for the government, but you would never actually confirm it. But with the audacity of the Time article, and now fortifying elections, and now they've got to fortify information, it's almost like, I get the impression they've set the table, they've set the tone. This is how it works. It's not corruption when it happens. It's just for your own good, and there's nothing wrong about it. And that may or may not fly when it comes to this type of, effectively the government doing indirectly what it's not allowed doing directly, which is acting as a government entity, but also not respecting the principles of the Constitution. So it will be fascinating. Do you know anything that you're allowed to talk about of the children's defense lawsuit, strategy-wise, or upcoming strategy, change of strategy?
Not that it didn't authorized to discuss.
Okay.
So I'm just discussing at this point what's in the public record. It's publicly known that I support the cases and support the suits and will help in any way possible. But they can read the motions to dismiss are pending. The response to them are very well argued, very well drafted. Credit to Bobby Kennedy for recognizing this from the get-go. It's just someone that it's like the second half of his father's career. It's fascinating. I mean, there's a reason why I was a big fan of his father. The world might have taken a different path had he not been assassinated, his father. So just a deep strike. Whatever people think about the Kennedys, I know my friends on the right aren't necessarily fans, but there's a streak of Kennedys that even people on the right have usually acknowledged, that know about it, that's just very conscientious and that ask questions wherever those questions may go, regardless of where they may go. And so he's in the best of the Kennedy family tradition in bringing these issues